My name is Daniel Price. I'm 41 years old, live just outside of Flagstaff, Arizona, and up until recently, I thought I had a pretty decent grip on life. I worked as a truck mechanic, owned my modest house, and had a wife I believed was my partner in all things. Her name was Kelsey. Beautiful, sharp-tongued, and dangerously charming. A woman who could flip from sweet to sarcastic in under 3 seconds. That should have been a clue, but I mistook her bite for wit. She had 2 sisters, Amber and Jade, and when the 3 of them got together, they acted like a teenage clique trapped in adult bodies. There was something unsettling about how they'd whisper, giggle, and glance in my direction, always like I was some kind of inside joke. But I laughed it off. Told myself not to overthink it. It was Kelsey's idea to take a weekend trip, just us and her sisters. One last road adventure before summer ends, she said, her eyes sparkling in a way I hadn't seen in months. I was exhausted from a tough work week, but I agreed. Figured it might help reset things between us. Little did I know I was about to walk right into the most humiliating moment of my life. We left early Friday morning in Jade's SUV. Kelsey had packed sandwiches and drinks. The girls played upbeat pop music while I drove, and the whole ride felt strangely forced, like everyone was performing joy. Around lunchtime, Jade insisted we take a detour to some scenic overlook she saw on TikTok. My gut said no, but I kept quiet. I didn't want to be the buzzkill. We pulled off onto a narrow road that snaked through dry hills. I noticed the bars on my phone signal disappearing, one by one. Anyone else losing service? I asked, but they just smirked. Relax, Dan, Amber chirped from the back seat. We're not going into the wilderness. Eventually Jade stopped the car in an open clearing. No overlook, no lake, just miles of dirt, brush, and a sky turning pale from the setting sun. This is it? I asked, stepping out to stretch my legs. Actually, Kelsey said, walking around the back of the car with that same glint in her eyes, this is where we leave you. I laughed, because of course it was a joke. Right? Until they jumped back into the SUV, locked the doors, and rolled down the window just enough to let Kelsey shout, "Maybe next time you won't forget my birthday." I stood there frozen, disbelief crashing into me like a semi. Wait, what? The engine roared. The SUV backed up, turned, and kicked up a cloud of dust as it peeled away. The 3 of them laughing hysterically inside. My legs gave out. I dropped onto the dirt as the sound of tires faded into nothing. It took me several minutes to accept what had just happened. No wallet, no phone, just me, the clothes on my back, and a slowly dying sun above. My mind spun, flipping through all the recent months for clues. Had I really missed her birthday? No, I'd bought her that gold chain she wanted. Took her to that overpriced Italian place. What kind of twisted logic justified this? This wasn't a prank. It was cruelty dressed up as a joke, and I was the punchline. I started walking in the direction we came from. I didn't know how far the highway was, or even what direction I was truly headed in, but I knew I had to keep moving. Anger began to rise with each step, not just toward Kelsey, but toward myself, for ignoring the red flags, for letting them treat me like a background character in my own life. By the time I saw headlights on the horizon, my feet were blistered and my throat was sandpaper. A rancher driving a beat-up Chevy picked me up. He didn't ask too many questions, just handed me a bottle of water and pointed toward town. "You look like hell, son," he muttered. I wanted to say something clever, something that would sum up the betrayal burning in my gut. But all I managed was, "You don't know the half of it." As we rode in silence, I stared out the window at the desert. One thing was clear, I wasn't going back to that house. not as the man I was. If they thought they'd broken me, they'd soon learn. I hadn't even started writing my comeback, because this wasn't going to end with a sad story about a man abandoned. It was going to end with a reckoning. The rancher dropped me off at a dusty diner just outside of Winslow, Arizona. I thanked him with a handshake and a nod, then limped inside, my boots caked in dust, shirt sticking to my back from the long walk under the sun. The waitress, middle-aged, kind eyes, heavy mascara, looked me over and said, "Coffee." I nodded, collapsed into a booth, and wrapped my hands around the warm mug when it came. I didn't even realize how badly I was shaking until then. That first sip grounded me, brought me back from the brink of rage and humiliation. It also reminded me that the world hadn't ended, not yet. I was still here. I still had options. A payphone stood in the corner of the diner like some relic from a different era, but that thing might as well have been gold. I borrowed a few coins from the waitress, promised to return them with interest, and dialed the only number I knew by heart. Zach Reynolds, my oldest friend and the closest thing I had to a brother. He picked up on the third ring. "Dan? Dude, what the hell?" I told him everything in short, clipped sentences. The drive, the prank, the desert, the walk. There was a long pause on the other end, and I could almost hear his jaw clenching. "They left you in the middle of nowhere for that," he finally said. "Over a birthday." "It wasn't about a birthday," I replied, my voice hollow. "That was just an excuse. They enjoyed it." 10 minutes later, Zach was on his way. He lived 2 towns over and didn't ask for more details. Just told me to stay put. As I waited, I kept thinking about how smug Kelsey had looked, her hair whipping in the wind as they drove off. That wasn't someone pulling a harmless prank. That was someone reveling in power, and power unchecked becomes abuse. When Zach arrived, he didn't even greet me with a hug, just handed me a fresh t-shirt and a burger from some drive-thru. "You're not going back there, right?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "I'm going forward." I stayed with Zach for the next few days, laying low, licking my wounds. But every hour I spent in silence only intensified the storm brewing inside me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my life. Zach had a home office where he ran his small contracting business. I spent hours there in the evenings, scrolling through old emails, pulling up bank statements, and digging into anything tied to Kelsey. That's when I found something strange. 3 months ago, Kelsey had opened a separate checking account. It was under her maiden name. I hadn't noticed because the joint account was still active, just less money in it than usual. But that new account, it was fat with recent deposits. Tens of thousands, more than we ever saved together. That was the moment the prank became something else. Not only had she abandoned me 200 miles from home, she'd been quietly siphoning money from our life and stashing it somewhere I wasn't supposed to look. I couldn't believe how blind I'd been. What else had I missed? Zach leaned over my shoulder and said, "Dan, I think she's planning something bigger. You don't hide that kind of money unless you're setting up an escape plan." Escape plan. Those words stuck with me. I decided to visit our home while Kelsey was at work. I needed answers. Needed to see for myself what was really going on in the shadows of my own marriage. When I walked through the front door, it felt like stepping into a stranger's house. The furniture was rearranged, our pictures were gone from the walls, and in their place were sleek, impersonal decor pieces, like something out of a staged real estate brochure. The bedroom looked untouched, except for one thing, a black duffel bag on her side of the closet, half-zipped, filled with clothes and toiletries. She was getting ready to leave, or kick me out. Maybe both. But I was already gone. And now, I was done being passive. This wasn't about yelling or begging or burning bridges. No, I'd play her game, just smarter. I called a lawyer that afternoon. Not to file anything yet, but to understand my position. I learned more in that one conversation than I had in a year of being married. Arizona's marital laws, asset division, the implications of hidden accounts, it was a lot. But it gave me a roadmap. And now that I had a direction, there was no stopping me. Kelsey thought she'd written the ending to my story the day she drove away. But I had just started writing the prologue to hers. I didn't confront her. Not yet. That would have been easy. Too easy. I wanted the truth, and more importantly, I wanted the whole truth. Confronting her now would only send her into defense mode, spinning lies that would cloud everything. No, I needed patience. While she thought I was licking my wounds or sulking somewhere, I was moving pieces quietly, calculating every move like a man who had finally seen the board clearly. I filed a quiet request with the bank to trace all transactions connected to our joint account over the past 6 months. My lawyer helped word it properly. It looked like routine financial inquiry, nothing alarming. But when the report came back, I felt the floor shift beneath me. There were purchases I couldn't explain, luxury bags, expensive dinners, hotel stays in places I'd never been. And they all followed the same pattern. Weekends when she said she was visiting her sister in Phoenix. The worst part, a recurring name on the hotel bookings, Nathan. No last name, but consistent enough to make my stomach twist. I printed every page and laid them out on Zach's kitchen table. The receipts, the dates, the withdrawals, it was all there. This wasn't just financial betrayal. She wasn't just siphoning money. She was living another life on the side. And I had funded it. Zach leaned over, jaw clenched. "You sure you want to keep playing it quiet?" I nodded. "I'm not trying to win an argument, Zach. I'm going to take back everything she thought she could steal and make sure she regrets every second of this. But for that, I needed evidence." The next week, I rented a small studio apartment under a friend's name and installed a couple of discreet security cameras around the house, one at the entryway, one in the living room, and one pointed at the closet where she kept that duffel bag. All legal, since it was still my home. Then I played the role of the disappeared husband perfectly. I left her a short civil voicemail. "I need time to think. I'll be staying with a friend. Let's talk after the holidays." Just enough to sound reasonable, nothing that would spark suspicion. She didn't even reply. But a few days later, the cameras did. I watched from my phone late one night as Kelsey stumbled in, laughing, arm in arm with a man I'd never seen. He was tall, clean-cut, wearing a designer coat. Nathan? Maybe. They poured wine, played music, danced. She even pulled out the birthday cake she never gave me and served it to him. I stared at the screen, the knot in my stomach hardening. She wasn't just living her life, she was celebrating my absence. Then she did something that snapped the last string of restraint I had. She opened the duffel bag, started handing him clothes. His clothes, she was moving him in. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling of my tiny apartment, while Zach snored on the couch next to me. My thoughts were sharp, furious, but controlled. If she thought she had won, I would let her bask in it. I'd let her throw her parties and pretend the world was hers. But I was done waiting. It was time to start building my case. With my lawyer's help, I filed motions to freeze the joint account. I used the hotel records and the camera footage as leverage to demand an emergency injunction. And since Arizona recognizes marital waste, the act of one spouse spending money irresponsibly or immorally, we had a strong argument. By the end of the week, not only was the joint account locked, but Kelsey would soon receive notice that she was being investigated for misappropriation of marital funds. I still hadn't spoken to her. I didn't need to. The silence was my weapon now. Zach and I spent the next few days building a timeline, sorting files, and preparing a digital backup of everything. My lawyer was confident. She thinks she's blindsided you, but you're already 3 moves ahead. And she was about to find that out the hard way. I had always imagined betrayal would feel like fire, loud, raging, violent. But in truth, it was quiet. Like a slow leak from a pipe you don't notice until your whole house is underwater. And Kelsey? She had no idea the water was already up to her neck. The day the financial freeze hit, I watched through the ring cam as she stood on our front porch, shouting into her phone with growing panic. Her voice was muffled, but the rage in her body was clear, shoulders tight, hands flailing, pacing like a trapped animal. I wondered if she was calling the bank, or Nathan. Either way, the game had officially shifted. My lawyer filed for legal separation that afternoon. With the evidence of her affair, misuse of joint funds, and the surveillance I had collected, we had a near-flawless case. In Arizona, that kind of documentation meant I could protect nearly all of my assets, including the house which I had owned before the marriage. Zach looked over the paperwork and whistled. She's going to lose her mind when she sees this. I didn't smile. I wasn't doing this to gloat. I was doing it to reclaim my dignity, and maybe, just maybe, to protect the man I used to be before all this. The letter was delivered by a process server the next morning. I had requested they do it while she was home, not out with Nathan or pretending to mourn my absence. According to the notes, she cried at first, then screamed, then slammed the door. That night she called me. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then she called again. On the 3rd try I answered. Her voice trembled. "Mark, what is this? You froze our accounts. You're suing me." I took a breath, calm and even. "No, Kelsey, I'm protecting myself. You made your choices. I'm just reacting to them. You don't understand, okay? I was confused. You've been gone so much. You didn't even notice how lonely I was." That line stung, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of reacting. "So your solution was to bring another man into our house, to spend our savings on hotel rooms and champagne while I was still trying to fix things." She was silent. I continued. "You made your choices. Now you live with the consequences. You can't just cut me off like this." "I didn't. You did." I hung up. It was the first time in years I'd felt in control of my life. Still, that night wasn't easy. Even with Zach snoring in the next room and the weight of legal protection on my side, my heart felt heavy. Not for her, but for the version of myself that believed in her, trusted her, built a life around her. I remembered the early days of our marriage, the way she used to laugh with her whole face, the way she danced barefoot in the kitchen while dinner burned in the oven. That version of her felt like a stranger now. Maybe she had been all along. But one thing was clear, she had underestimated me, and I had no intention of letting her win. A week later, the moment that changed everything for her and confirmed everything for me arrived on a quiet Saturday afternoon. I was back in Phoenix now, temporarily staying at my buddy Zach's condo. We were watching a Cardinals game when his phone pinged with a social media alert. "Bro, is this her?" Zach said, holding up his phone. It was a short Instagram reel, only 13 seconds long, but it was enough to shatter any illusions that might have remained. Kelsey, her sisters, Nathan, laughing, drinking, holding a handmade sign that read, "Takes two to tango, but only one fool to fund the dance." The caption read, #sister prank, success left him 200 miles out. They stared at the screen, my stomach turning, not with sadness this time, but something colder, sharper. Zach's face said it all. They left you, as a prank. The video had over 14,000 views already, and the comments were merciless. He was probably better off in the desert. Plot twist. She takes the house and the dog. This isn't a prank, it's abuse. I felt a strange calm settle over me. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was public humiliation. It all clicked. The missing credit card charges, the coordinated girls' trip stories, the smirks I caught from her sisters the night before I was left stranded. They planned it. Like some twisted reality show episode. I knew then that this wasn't just about ending a marriage. This was about ending their ability to ever hurt me, or anyone else the same way again. I called my lawyer immediately. "This changes everything," I told her. "We're adding defamation and emotional distress. I want that video archived and preserved as evidence." She didn't hesitate. "Understood. I'll get subpoenas for the social media platform. Do you want to go after the sisters too?" "Every single one of them, and Nathan." Well, I had other plans for him. Over the next few days I worked quietly. I hired a private investigator to dig into Nathan's employment. Turns out, he was up for a promotion at a major financial firm in Scottsdale. His record had been squeaky clean, until now. Let's just say I made sure the HR department had a copy of that Instagram video. Meanwhile, my lawyer filed new motions. We demanded exclusive use of the house, restitution for stolen funds, and a public takedown of the video, or else we'd escalate to a defamation suit that could hit 6 figures. Kelsey tried to call again. I didn't answer, but I did send her a short message. "See you in court." The courtroom smelled like old wood and cold air, sterile, silent, serious. Kelsey sat across from me, her once confident posture now stiff, brittle. She was no longer the glowing, smug woman from that Instagram video. Her eyes darted from the judge to the gallery, never once meeting mine. Her sisters weren't there to back her up. I suppose they realized they were now liabilities more than support. Their names were in the motion for character testimony and digital harassment. They probably received notices in the mail by then. And Nathan, he wasn't anywhere near the building. Rumor was he'd been suspended pending investigation. Kelsey's lawyer started with a weak opening, painting the situation as a marital miscommunication, a regrettable series of events that had been exaggerated online by third parties. I'll never forget the moment my lawyer stood up, calm but sharp. "Your Honor, this wasn't a miscommunication. This was premeditated psychological torment, captured, shared, and celebrated for internet clout. My client was stranded, humiliated, and financially exploited. Then came the exhibits, screenshots, video evidence, credit card records, a timeline that left no room for coincidence." The judge raised an eyebrow when the Instagram clip played in court. Kelsey squirmed. She tried to explain it away during her testimony. "It was supposed to be funny. I didn't mean for it to go viral. I didn't think," that the judge said, "is precisely the problem. I didn't have to say much. Just recount what happened, how I felt, what I'd lost, and what I refused to lose ever again." After a short recess, the ruling came swiftly. Temporary spousal support. Denied. Right to remain in the house. Denied. She was ordered to repay the $12,000 in unauthorized withdrawals from our joint account, plus an additional $8,500 in damages for emotional distress and public defamation. The judge added, "This court finds the conduct of the defendant to be malicious in nature." Kelsey sat there stunned. No tears, no excuses, just silence. Outside the courthouse, the sun hit my face like a fresh start. I hadn't won back time or trust, but I had reclaimed my dignity. And I wasn't done yet, because justice in court was one thing, but what came next, that was personal. It didn't take long for the fallout to hit Kelsey like a freight train. The court ruling alone should have been enough, but the real blow came after. A few days after the verdict, I received a direct message from a podcast host. Apparently, Kelsey's prank had made its way into a trending segment on social media about toxic couples and viral regret. The hosts dissected the footage. Her laughter, my confusion, the hashtags. They didn't know my name. I'd stayed anonymous in the viral circles, but they dragged hers through the mud with surgical precision. Imagine posting your own humiliation campaign, then being shocked when it backfires. One of them said, "That clip went viral too." And suddenly, Kelsey wasn't just a name on a divorce file. She was a walking cautionary tale. By the end of that week, the salon she worked at quietly removed her from their staff page. A friend of mine who still lived in the neighborhood told me Kelsey had been let go, officially for unrelated reasons, but anyone paying attention knew why. I never posted a word about it, never said her name publicly. But justice had a funny way of moving with its own rhythm. What stung the most for Kelsey, though, wasn't the job or the legal defeat. It was the silence. No one defended her. Not her sisters, not even her mother, who had once called me the most grounded man her daughter had ever dated. She sent me an email, actually. A short one. "I don't know what got into her. I'm sorry you were hurt like that. You deserved better." That line stayed with me. For once someone in Kelsey's world saw me for what I was. A man trying to love, live and build something real, only to be laughed at and left behind. But the best revenge was that I kept moving forward, not fueled by hate, but driven by purpose. Because while Kelsey's name became associated with shame, mine remained untouched, clean, quiet, and ready for something better. 3 months after the dust settled, I found myself walking through a local arts festival in Asheville. It was the kind of thing Kelsey always said was boring, but I loved it. Live jazz floated through the air, and the smell of kettle corn mixed with the crisp North Carolina breeze. I wasn't there to meet anyone, just browsing, healing, learning to breathe again. And then I met her. A booth tucked near the edge of the park displayed handcrafted woodwork, intricate clocks, jewelry boxes, and picture frames carved with patient hands. Behind the table stood a woman with warm eyes and calloused fingers. "Looking for something?" she asked. I shook my head, just admiring the craftsmanship. She smiled. "That means a lot. I do all the carving myself." Her name was Lauren. She ran the booth alone, lived a few towns over, and taught woodworking at a community college. We chatted for 20 minutes. Then we talked again the next week, and the next. There were no games, no manipulation, no tests, just quiet moments that felt safe. Lauren didn't need rescuing. She didn't need someone to fund her lifestyle or make her feel adored in public. She was self-made, a little sarcastic, and incredibly thoughtful. She also didn't know anything about my past. Not until I told her. I remember the night clearly. We were sitting on the hood of my truck, overlooking the Blue Ridge Mountains. the sky bleeding orange and violet as the sun dipped behind the ridge. "I've been through something," I said. She looked over, patient. "My ex-wife. She did something cruel, publicly. It hurt. I got my revenge, in my own way, but I carry the weight of that still." Lauren didn't flinch. She just took my hand and said, "Then I'm glad you're here, still standing, still kind." And that was it. No questions, no judgment. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a punchline. I felt like a man who had been humiliated, cast aside, but who had rebuilt not with anger, but with quiet purpose. It was a chilly Friday afternoon when I got a call I wasn't expecting from Madeline. Not Kelsey, not her sisters, her mother. "Griffin," she said, her voice cautious. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but could we talk?" I paused. Talk? About what? About what happened? About Kelsey. She's not doing well. I met her at a diner off the interstate, mostly because I was curious. Madeline arrived looking 10 years older than the last time I'd seen her. Her eyes were sunken, voice low, movement slow. "Kelsey's been drinking a lot," she said, stirring her coffee endlessly. "After everything that happened, the wedding, the house, the business, she's unraveling." I raised an eyebrow. "And why are you telling me this?" "Because she blames herself, and she should. But it's more than guilt. She's lost. You were the only person who grounded her." I let the silence hang between us for a long while. "I wasn't her anchor," I finally said. "I was her target." Madeline didn't argue. She only nodded. Then came the part that almost made me laugh. "She wants to apologize. She wrote a letter. She asked me to give it to you." She slid an envelope across the table. I didn't open it, just stared at it. "She said she never expected you to walk away completely," Madeline added. "She thought you'd come back, that you needed her." That was the cruelest part, wasn't it? Kelsey never thought I'd actually leave for good. Even after what she did, she expected I'd stay on the leash, wounded but obedient. "Tell her," I said, pushing the letter back, "that forgiveness isn't a door she gets to walk through. Not anymore." Madeline exhaled, clearly not surprised. Before leaving, she looked back and said, "You were the best thing that ever happened to her." And she destroyed it. That'll haunt her longer than anything else. Maybe it would. Maybe it already did. But it wasn't my burden anymore. I got in my truck, rolled down the windows, and let the wind rush over me as I drove home, to the small house I'd built with my own hands, to the dog I'd rescued, to the woman who saw me for more than my scars. They say revenge is best served cold. But sometimes it's warm, quiet, and it looks like peace. It had been a year since the prank. A year since I was stranded on the side of a remote highway with nothing but the clothes on my back and a crushed heart beating beneath them. And now, as I stood beneath the broad oak tree behind my newly built home, the one I poured my savings and sweat into, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Not even a little. Kelsey had filed for bankruptcy just 3 months prior. Her wedding business tanked. Word had spread like wildfire about what she and her sisters had done. Clients disappeared. Vendors dropped them. And when someone leaked a snippet of her screaming at me on that roadside, yes, someone had filmed it from a distance, the internet turned colder than the snowstorm I'd trudged through that day. That prank destroyed her brand. And me, I rebuilt. Quietly. Steadily. After quitting my previous job, I took my carpentry skills full-time. A friend from an old vet support group connected me with real work. Within 6 months, I was remodeling homes across the state. Word of mouth spread. Clients appreciated my honesty and attention to detail. They didn't care about the past, only the work in front of them. One morning, while sipping coffee from my porch, I received a package. No return address. Inside was a photo of Kelsey and her sisters, their smiles forced, their faces weary. Scrawled across the back in her handwriting were 3 words: "You won. Goodbye." There was no bitterness in those words, no sarcasm, just surrender. I tucked the photo away, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of how far I'd come, and what I'd left behind. That night, I hosted dinner for a few friends, including Mia, a local artist I'd met through a renovation project. She was bright, funny, and refreshingly genuine. Nothing about her felt like performance. When I told her my story, the real one, she didn't flinch, she just listened. Later, as we stood outside watching the stars emerge one by one, she nudged my arm and said, "You don't talk like a man who was betrayed. You talk like a man who finally found himself." She wasn't wrong. For so long, I thought revenge would look like Kelsey's downfall. But it didn't. It looked like me rising, choosing peace over pain, and finally learning that the best revenge is moving on without leaving room for someone who never deserved you to begin with.